Our Chief Guest of Honor, Dr. Fred Matiangi, Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Education, Chief Justice Willie Mutunga, Chancellor Dr. Manu Chandaria, board members, council members, Professor Paul Zeleza, incoming Vice Chancellor, faculty, staff, students, and distinguished guests. It is a pleasure for me to be back on campus for the inauguration of Professor Paul Zeleza as the second Vice Chancellor of United States International University, Africa. Let me digress just a bit, since I am the institutional memory here at USIU. In the late 1960s, Dr. William Rust, then president of California Western University, had a vision. His vision was of international education, an education that would see students and faculty share and embrace knowledge around the world. Among his target countries was one of the newly independent nations in Africa. After traveling to Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya, he chose Kenya as the first Africa campus of United States International University. In 1970, he signed an MOU with the government of Kenya that allowed him to offer business programs and any other degree programs not being offered by public universities. Clearly, a bit of protectionism going on even back then. Nevertheless, there were opportunities in Africa. A renaissance was underway with hopes and dreams for the newly emerging nations and their people. Rust's journey was not an easy one. There were many challenges to his vision, including convincing the Kenyan government that an American education was just as good as a British one. He also had to convince the US accrediting body of the viability of an international multi-campus system. There was no internet in 1970, and faculty did travel as well as students. Campuses were established and closed over the years, and yet the legacy of international education that began 46 years ago continues to thrive at USIU Africa today. You just saw an education that took us from Rwanda to Korea. So we really do have an education that takes us places here on campus. There were numerous directors over the next 14 years, but in 1984, Dr. Lillian Beam became the first director that would devote 10 years of her life to USIU Africa. Her vision was to stabilize and expand the university. Her goal, that she often shared, was to have 2,000 students by the year 2000. And although she no longer was director at that time, that goal was realized. Obstacles plagued her journey as well. One was the newly passed Universities Act of 1986 and the rules and regulations that followed in 1989. All private universities had to comply with the new quality assurance standards. So she began the arduous task of obtaining Kenyan accreditation. Among those requirements was 50 acres of land. After several attempts to buy property, she was able to stabilize the campus by purchasing the initial 20 acres and began an aggressive building campaign. She had to build quickly because the hotel that housed the university had been sold. Most of the buildings you see on the backside of campus there were her initiative. Many of them were simply to be temporary. Interestingly, by expanding the campus in the early 1990s, she was able to take advantage of a looming opportunity. The year-long strike in the public university sector attracted students looking to complete their education. The student population grew from 250 to 800. She also attracted highly qualified faculty who needed employment. However, most were not willing to commit to full-time employment in such a fledgling institution, but many would stay on as adjuncts. Dr. Beam's dedication to the university set the foundation for it to become the institution it is today. In 1994, Dr. Gary Hayes, then president of USIU San Diego, asked if I would consider being the executive director of the Nairobi campus. Dr. Beam was retiring. He told me there were problems on the campus. They had done an audit The outstanding construction bill was $1.5 million, with the contractor charging 36% interest. Buildings needed to be completed. There were problems in the finance office. There were no faculty and no charter yet. He didn't know if the campus would last another year. But me, I was a product of the 60s and 70s. We had a sense of Black pride instilled in us. I had lived in Botswana. I'd been the coordinator of international campuses in San Diego. I had taught students at USIU Africa in 1990 and knew of their enthusiasm to learn. I was akin to the people of this continent. I liked a challenge. Sounded like a great job to me. So here I am. I envisioned USIU Africa as a quality institution with a global perspective, which is reflected in the current vision statement. As with Rust and Beam, there were many opportunities and challenges over the past 21 years. The first challenge was to get out of debt. Otherwise, San Diego would close us down. I negotiated what is commonly known as an interest-free payment plan with a contractor, and within 2 years, we were out of debt. Where did the money come from? Professor Zeleza, tight budgeting, great auditors, and a bit of housekeeping in the finance office. There were not many funding options for construction in the 1990s. Bank loans were not an option. And although interest rates in Kenya have reduced since 1994, they've never gone below 13% with a variable rate. I learned from my Kenyan staff, save and build. All of the new buildings used university funds, mostly through investments, resulting from the same high interest rates offered by the government and the banks. Private universities had neither access to government-guaranteed loans nor low interest rate loans. This is changing with the introduction of the University Funding Board that was formed under the new Universities Act of 2012. An opportunity to explore, especially since my first head of finance and administration is chairing that board. In the 1990s, donor money was not readily available for private universities, and very few donors provided funding for buildings. Those that did, frankly, told us there were more needy public institutions. It would be some 10 years later that the American Schools and Hospitals Abroad program of USID would grant us $2 million towards the construction of this library. Alumni giving was also a challenge. Prior to the 90s, the average graduating class was about 50 or less, so the alumni base was very small. In comparison, over the last 10 years, the average size is about 1,000. I trust that this base will be a generous one to advance future projects of the university and to grow our endowment fund. Having the requisite number of qualified faculty was a challenge in 1994 and remains a challenge today. The number of full-time faculty has grown from 10 to about 119. However, with the proliferation of universities and satellite campuses, human resources are stretched. Recruiting, nourishing, and supporting faculty remains critical to strengthening the vision of academic excellence and quality. 5 years after the gazettement of the rules and regulations for the University Act of 1989, Dr. Beam was yet to obtain a charter. We needed the charter to continue operating in the country. The two contentious issues were land and governance. Although Beam had acquired 20 acres of land, the rules and regulations of 1989 stipulated 60 acres were needed in order to be chartered. This requirement was met in 1998 with the purchase of 60 acres in Garden Estates, and we did pay cash, by the way. Presently, the university has 160 acres of land that will accommodate its growing student population and programs, both curricular and co-curricular. So it's up to you to start building, Prof. Governance structures was also an issue in 1994 when the Commission for Higher Education wanted a local board with little or no involvement of the San Diego campus. This became a battleground that transcended 10 years as we tried to resolve the demands of the Kenyan and the U.S. accrediting bodies, because we have been accredited since '82 in the U.S. Dual accreditation was not a popular concept in 1994, but some battles are worth fighting. Consequently, in 1999, USIU Africa received its charter from former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, and I became its first Vice Chancellor. Today, USIU Africa is the only dually accredited university in Kenya. Others are clamoring for this distinction. It will be up to the university to maintain this dual status that attests to the quality of education provided to our new students. The new Universities Act of 2012 has resurfaced some of the same issues with governance. As the university works through the nuances of the new act, be mindful of the requirements of this dual accreditation. I have only mentioned a few of my challenges and opportunities as I strove to achieve my vision of a quality institution with a global perspective. But I did not do this alone. I needed a strong team, and over the years I've worked with some dedicated managers, faculty, and staff who have had the same vision and acted to realize this vision. Administrators who helped develop policies and procedures and put systems in place, staff who implemented these policies, be it through the good customer service or by simply keeping the compound clean. We've had excellent faculty who have been the engine of this university, and the committed board members who oftentimes were up at wee hours in the morning, but they approved policies, advised, and gave me the latitude to do what I felt was best for the university. All must work together for the good of the university with a centrality of purpose, and all must be treated with respect and dignity. Professor Zeleza, I cannot stress how important it is to have a strong support system outside the university. Your colleagues are an essential part of that system. If we look back in 2003, Ford Foundation funded a grant to USIU to look at the role of private universities in higher education in Africa. As a result of that, the VCs of private universities here in Kenya began to meet and visit each other's campuses. This led to the formation of the Kenya Association of Private Universities. I chaired CAPU for 10 years and many of the changes in the University Act of 2012 that improved the conditions for the private sector were a result of the 12 institutions that met and drafted numerous position papers, went to countless stakeholder meetings, responded to various drafts on financing higher education, strategic plan for higher education in Kenya, and went to numerous parliamentary hearings, the good kind, by the way. It is through this collective whole that private universities have had a voice. It has also provided an opportunity to learn that we have similar experiences and can support each other, so keep them close. Finally, have at least one external person helps to remind you why you are here. I know you have a spouse, but sometimes she might say, why are we here too? For me, it was my mother. Her constant rejoinder to my threats to quit and come home was, remember, you are here to provide a good education for the students. The students of USIU will indeed be your biggest source of strength and motivation when your energy is drained and you wonder if it's worth it. As you walk among them, you know that you are helping to make a difference in their lives and the nations they will serve. It's really not about you, it's about them. They will give you the courage to fight the difficult battles, assess the criticisms, and accept the good advice that will allow you to further develop USIU Africa into a premier institution of academic excellence with a global perspective. Professor Zeleza, as they always tell me, I did it my way, and now you will need to move the university towards your vision, your way. Wishing you much success in this great job. Congratulations.